Good day, students. Okay, we're starting a new series of videos, and this video is focused on early algebra. And the first thing we have to talk about in algebra is what is a variable. Okay, now a variable is a letter, such as y, that represents a number. Now, in algebra, often we don't know what the number is. So in this case, y represents the number of beans inside this cup. We don't actually know how many beans are inside there, so we use a letter because we can't put a number on it. Let's find out how many beans are in there. So I'll take the bean. Oh, I should take them out of the top of the cup. It looks more practical. And it turns out in that particular cup, there are 5 beans. So for this particular cup, y equals 5. Let's have a look at Reller's second cup. And in that cup, y is also 5. So what this shows us is that for any one particular problem, if the same variable appears more than once, it has to have the same value each time within that problem. So in this case, we would say the variable y equals 5 or has the value 5. Okay, Georgia has some cups. Again, we don't know how many beans are in the cups. She again has labeled them as y, so let's just take the beans out and see how many we have. Okay, in that cup, Georgia has 3 beans, so y equals 3. And in that cup, Georgia has 3 beans. So once again, for Georgia, if y in this cup equals 3, y also has to have the value 3 in that cup, but it's different to Reller's y. So for a different question, the value of y can change. Within one question, the value of y is the same. In a different question, the value of y might be different. So that might help explain this cartoon. Today, or in this question, the value of x equals 3. But in the question that the teacher did yesterday, the value of x was different to that. It was equal to 2. So x is a variable because it can take on different values. Okay, let's have a look at Alice's cups. Now this cup here, this one contains y beans, and that one contains z beans. So for Alice, the value of y is just 2. And for z, the value of y is 4. So this illustrates the fact that if you have 2 variables in a question, they can have different values. In fact, usually they do. So for Alice, y equals 2 and z equals 4. Now let's see what's in Emmett's cups. In his cup labeled y, he has y equals 3. And in the cup labeled z, z is also equal to 3. What this shows us is that if we do have 2 variables in a question, sometimes they can have the same value. So in this case, y and z both equal 3. But in general, if you've got 2 variables, they represent different numbers. Okay, let's have a look at the language of algebra. Now I'm going to start with this one at the bottom because this is called an equation. So an equation is a statement using algebra that contains an equal sign. So if you see an equal sign, it's called an equation. So, get my pen tool. The equation is t equals 3n plus 4. Now variables are just letters that represent numbers. So in this case, we've got the letter n, we have the letter t. So those are the variables in the equation. Pronumeral is just another word for variable. It's a little bit old-fashioned, but every time you see the word pronumeral used in a textbook, it just means variable. So the pronumerals are also n and t. A term are things that you add or subtract. So in this case, the terms are 3n and 4, because we're adding 3n to 4. And we can also call that variable t on the left, we can also call that a term. So terms are, in general, added and subtracted. Constant is a term that doesn't change. So t can take on different values, n can take on different values, but the plus 4 doesn't change. So the constant in this case is just the number 4. A coefficient is a number in front of a letter. So in this case, we've got the variable n and 3 in front of that, which you'll learn later means to multiply. The coefficient is 3. And finally, an expression is one side of an equal sign. So it could be 3n plus 4 is an expression. So expressions don't have equal signs. T by itself is also an expression. The 3n by itself is an expression, and the 4 by itself is an expression. So an expression basically is an algebraic statement that doesn't contain an equal sign. Okay, let's go ahead and practice this. So what I'd like you to do is, maybe don't write this down, but just have a quick look, and I want you to identify what each of these is. Now, sometimes these might have more than one answer. So I'll go through and do them, but you might want to stop the video and have a go on your own first. Okay, the first one contains an equal sign, therefore that's an equation. The 5x in this expression here is, or I should say in that equation there, the 5x is an expression. It's also a term because we're adding and subtracting, so that's a term. It's not a variable because it has the 5 in it. It's not a coefficient because it's got the letter in it. And it's not a constant because it's got the variable x, which can change. 4, the best name for that is a constant, but because it's added and subtracted, that's also a term. The letter x, best name for that is a variable, and we can also call it a pronumeral. It's not a term because the term has to be the whole thing that's added and subtracted. So the term would be 5x. So 5x isn't a term. It's not a coefficient because it's not a number, and it's certainly not a constant. Okay, well, the 5, it's not a constant in this case because constants are added and subtracted. So 5 is multiplied by the x, so 5 is the coefficient. 5x minus 4, well, that whole thing is called an expression. It's not called an equation. It's not a term. It consists of two terms, but it's not a term by itself. It's not a variable. A variable is just a single letter, such as x. It's not a coefficient, because a coefficient is just a number that's multiplied by a letter, and it's not a constant. And the y is like the x. That's a variable. It's also, therefore, a pronumeral, because that's another word for variable. And because it's by itself on the left-hand side, you could also call that a term, and you could even call that an expression. So the y has quite a number of different names for itself, or quite a number of different names. Okay, let's have a look at this question. So there's an equation. Okay, so is it an equation or an expression? Well, because it has an equal sign. Oops, see if I can undo that. Because it has an equal sign, it is an equation. Write down the coefficient of b. Well, that's the variable a times b, or that's a times b, so the coefficient of b is just the 3. Write down all the terms in the equation. Well, terms are added and subtracted, so we have 6a, we have 3b, we have 4. We ignore the subtraction sign. The term is just a number. We also have on the right-hand side 2ab, c, and 7. So those are all the terms in that particular equation. The variables are just the letters that stand for numbers. So it's A, B, okay, there they are repeated, so I'm not going to write them again, and C. So that particular equation has 3 variables, A, B, and C, and the constants are the terms that are added or subtracted. So these numbers aren't constants, but 4 is. Again, the 4 is the constant, not -4. We're just subtracting 4, and the other constant is 7. Okay, let's try the next page. Okay, once again, we'll go through the same process. I'd like you to have a go at this one first. And you can just do it in your head, or you can write your answers down and then check your answers. Okay, let's go through the answers for this. Okay, first off, there's no equal sign in that, so therefore this is an expression. A coefficient on B, well, there's the variable B, so the coefficient on B is 7. The terms are those things that are added and subtracted, so that's 3D, 4F, 3BD, 3, and 7B. So those are the terms. Again, terms are added and subtracted. The variables, let's list them in alphabetical order. So we start with B. We also have the variable D. And we also have the variable F. Again, some of those are in the equation more than once, but we just write them once here. And constants, again, are any numbers that are added and subtracted. So they're terms that consist just of numbers. So the only constant in this is 3. Okay, so there's a fairly quick look at some of the terminology that we use with algebra, and hopefully you have some idea of what a variable is. Okay, so in the next video, we'll start to look at like terms.